When I met Mia, she didn't walk into my life. She slid into it, like smoke through a crack in the door. She was quiet, elegant, the kind of woman who didn't need attention because attention naturally turned toward her. Everyone said she was mysterious, but I didn't see mystery. I saw control. She spoke softly, but her words carried weight. When she laughed, you felt lucky to be the reason. When she looked disappointed, it felt like you'd failed an exam you didn't know you were taking. We met at a small design firm where I just started working. She'd been there for years, respected, envied, untouchable. People warned me about her in whispers, saying she didn't do relationships, that she got bored easily. I should have listened, but I didn't, because when she turned her eyes toward me, I felt like the exception. At first, she was perfect. She remembered everything I said, asked questions no one else ever had. What scares you most? What's your biggest regret? Who hurt you first? She said she liked knowing what made people tick. I thought she was just curious. I didn't realize she was collecting ammunition. Within weeks, we were inseparable. Late-night calls, coffee before work, notes on my desk that said, "Don't forget me." It felt intoxicating, like a movie where I finally found someone who understood every hidden part of me. She'd say, "I see you. You don't have to pretend with me." But what she didn't say was that once she saw me, she'd never let me be unseen again. Mia had this way of making love feel like an audition. Every gesture I made, every word I said, she studied it. If I didn't text fast enough, she'd go quiet. If I laughed at someone's joke, she'd raise an eyebrow and say, "You like her?" It always started as teasing, but behind her smirk was something sharper, something territorial. Then came the guilt. She started sharing stories about her awful exes, how they betrayed her, used her, abandoned her. She'd cry sometimes, real tears, not the kind that beg for attention, but the kind that beg for rescue. I swore I'd never hurt her like they did. I promised I'd be different. And that's when the trap closed. Because the moment I made that promise, she stopped being the woman I fell for and became the test I could never pass. Small things turned into accusations. You didn't answer because you were with her, weren't you? You smiled too much today. Who made you happy? Every question was wrapped in a soft voice, every insult hidden behind concern. And I kept trying to fix it. I told myself she was just scared, that she'd been hurt too much. But what I didn't realize then was that Mia didn't want to be healed. She wanted to be worshipped. And the more I tried to calm her fears, the more she turned them into proof that she was right. The day I finally understood what she was capable of was the day she smiled while I apologized. She didn't forgive me. She enjoyed it. It didn't happen all at once. That's the trick with people like Mia. They don't take control. They drip it into you, drop by drop, until you can't tell what's yours anymore. The first drops tasted like care. "I just worry about you," she'd say when I wanted to meet my friends. "They don't understand you like I do." It sounded loving, protective, but every word she spoke quietly erased a person from my life. The first to go was my best friend, Mark. We'd known each other since university. We'd been through everything together. One Friday, he called and asked if I wanted to grab a drink. I told Mia, expecting her usual smile and have fun, but her expression froze. "Oh," she said, sipping her wine. "Mark, the one who doesn't like me?" I frowned. "What? He's never said that." She gave a soft laugh. "He doesn't have to. I can tell. The way he looks at me, the way he talks to you." I tried to brush it off, but that night when I got home, she was curled up on the couch, her eyes red. "You left me alone," she whispered. "You know how hard that is for me." I sat beside her, apologizing for something that wasn't even wrong. She leaned into me, resting her head on my chest. "You're all I have," she murmured. And in that moment, I believed her. From then on, every invitation became a test. A co-worker asking me to grab lunch? Why would you need to eat with her? My sister calling to talk about our mom's birthday? Funny how you never tell me when she calls. Every piece of my life that didn't include her became a potential betrayal. I started declining invites, stopped answering calls. Not because I wanted to, but because it was easier than the argument that followed. And that's how it starts, not with chains, but with choices that stop feeling like your own. She began showing up at my office, by surprise. At first, it was sweet, a coffee in hand, a smile that turned heads. But soon it became constant. I'd walk out of a meeting and find her sitting in the lobby, pretending to scroll her phone. She'd say she just happened to be in the area, but her eyes always searched the faces around me. One afternoon, she showed up while I was having lunch with two colleagues, both women. The look she gave me when she saw us laughing, it was the kind of look that could slice glass. That night, she didn't yell. She didn't even speak. She just moved through the apartment like a ghost, silent, deliberate. When I asked what was wrong, she finally looked up and said, "Do you enjoy embarrassing me? What are you talking about?" "You're making me look like a fool," she said softly, but her tone cut through the air. "Everyone at your job thinks I'm some jealous girlfriend. Do you like that?" I didn't even know what to say. She turned away, shaking her head like she was holding back tears. "You know what?" she said. "Maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I should just disappear." I reached out instinctively, and that was exactly what she wanted. She stepped closer, her voice breaking. "You'd miss me, wouldn't you? Even if I left." "Mia, say it," she whispered. "Say you'd miss me." "I'd miss you," I said, just to stop the storm I saw coming. Her tears stopped instantly. She smiled. That's all I needed to hear. That was the night I realized she didn't want reassurance. She wanted proof of control. Every time she cried, every time she threatened to leave, she wasn't falling apart. She was tightening the strings. Soon, she began planting seeds at my job. Subtle things at first. Jokes about me being overworked, stressed, forgetful. At company parties, she'd laugh and say, "He's been so distracted lately. I think he's hiding something." People laughed, but her tone made it sound half true. Then, one morning, my manager called me in. "Is everything okay at home?" he asked gently. "Mia mentioned you've been struggling. We just want to make sure you're getting the help you need." I stared at him, speechless. She'd done it. She'd turned my workplace into her stage. At home that night, I confronted her. "Why did you say that to my boss?" She looked genuinely confused. "What do you mean?" "You told him I was struggling." She blinked. "Because you are." "No, I'm not." "Yes, you are," she said calmly. "You barely sleep. You forget things. You're moody. I'm just trying to help you." "Mia, that's not help. That's sabotage." She tilted her head and smiled. "So now I'm the villain?" I didn't answer. I couldn't, because somewhere deep inside, I already knew she wasn't losing control. She was building her alibi. That night, while she slept beside me, I scrolled through our messages. Every argument, every apology, every emotional twist, all there in black and white. Patterns I hadn't seen before. Manipulations I'd excused as love. And that's when I started saving everything. Screenshots, recordings, notes. Not because I wanted revenge, but because something in me finally whispered the truth I'd been afraid to admit. This woman wasn't trying to love me. She was trying to own me. By the time a few more months passed, I was barely recognizable. To myself, to my friends, even to my reflection. The man I used to be, the one who laughed easily, who had plans, who made choices, had been replaced by someone constantly calculating tone, silence, timing. Every word I spoke to Mia had to be measured, every expression rehearsed, every breath accounted for. She had rewritten me without ever asking permission. That was her talent. She never needed a shout to change your life. She just made you doubt your own voice until hers was the only one left. It began small, a joke she'd twist, a story she'd retell. I'd mention something from my day, and later she'd repeat it, but differently, subtly changed. The context warped. If I said my co-worker complimented my work, she'd retell it as, "He said his co-worker was flirting again." I'd laugh, correct her, but over time, the correction stopped matching. Her version always spread faster, louder, more convincingly. And every time she told it, there was a hint of pity in her tone, as if I were this poor, lost man who didn't even realize how much help he needed. One night, I caught her scrolling through my phone while I was in the shower. When I asked what she was doing, she smiled and said, "Just checking something." I told her that wasn't okay. Her smile vanished instantly. "You're hiding something," she said, her voice flat. "Why else would you care?" That's how she operated. Accusations disguised as logic. If you defended yourself, you were guilty. If you didn't, your silence was confession. She started creating arguments out of thin air. "You looked distant at dinner. You seemed annoyed when I called. Why didn't you text me the moment you woke up?" Every day brought a new crime, a new trial, a new sentence. And the worst part? She never raised her voice. Her cruelty was calm, methodical, almost surgical. She began isolating me more aggressively, but now it wasn't through guilt. It was through reputation. She told mutual friends that I'd become emotionally unstable, that I was acting out, that I had anger issues. When I found out, I confronted her, and she looked genuinely hurt. "I said that because I'm worried about you," she whispered. "I didn't want people to think less of you." It was brilliant. She turned concern into camouflage. Every lie she spread came wrapped in empathy, and people believed her because she sounded like she cared. Then came the night. She broke down crying in front of my friend Emily. We run into Emily at a cafe, and Mia suddenly started trembling, saying she didn't feel safe lately. Emily, shocked, asked what was wrong, and Mia whispered, "I can't talk about it here." I didn't even understand what was happening until later, when Emily stopped answering my messages, and another friend texted me, asking if everything was okay between us. That's when it hit me. She wasn't just rewriting my story. She was erasing me from my own life. I started noticing how she left traces everywhere. Little digital breadcrumbs that made me look like the problem. Half-finished texts saved in my drafts. Messages sent to her from my account that I didn't remember typing. She'd ask to borrow my phone and then return it minutes later with that same sweet smile. I began doubting my memory, my sanity. Some nights, I'd stay awake and watch her sleep, wondering if the person beside me was human or just a mask that moved like one. One evening, we went to dinner with her colleagues. She spent the entire night mocking me in subtle ways, correcting me, finishing my sentences, touching another man's arm while looking at me to make sure I saw. I didn't react, not there. But when we got home, she sat on the couch, crossed her legs, and said, "You embarrassed me tonight." I blinked. "What?" "You were cold, distant. I had to make up for it." "You flirted with your coworker." She tilted her head, smiling. "Oh, now you're jealous? That's cute." I felt the air leave my lungs. "You're doing this on purpose." Her smile widened. "And you're making it so easy." That was the first time I saw something in her eyes that wasn't charm or anger. It was hunger, a cold satisfaction. She wanted to see me break. Every tear she caused, every doubt she planted, every apology she dragged out of me, they weren't side effects. They were the reward. After that night, I began writing things down, not on my phone, but in a notebook she didn't know about. Times, dates, phrases she used. It wasn't for proof. It was survival. Because I knew what was coming. I could feel it, the storm she was building piece by piece. And then one morning, I woke up to find her sitting at the edge of the bed, staring at me. "I talked to your boss last night," she said. My blood went cold. "What?" She smiled faintly. "He called me. He said you've been distracted lately. I told him I was worried about you." I sat up, my chest tight. "You called him?" "No," she said, tilting her head. "He called me. Maybe someone told him something." "Who?" She shrugged. "People talk." That was the moment I realized she'd taken her game to a level I couldn't match. She wasn't just controlling how I felt. She was rewriting how the world saw me. And I knew then that if I didn't find a way out soon, I'd disappear completely. Not just from her life, but from my own. There's a moment when you're caught inside someone else's web, where you stop fighting the threads and start pretending they're not there. That's where I was with Mia, trapped, tangled, and performing normalcy so no one could see how much of my soul she'd already stripped away. But no matter how carefully I walked through each day, she always found a new way to pull a strand tighter. This time, she wanted an audience. It started with small, public humiliations. Little things I could pass as jokes to anyone else, but were daggers aimed straight at me. We'd be at dinner with friends, and she'd say, "Oh, don't mind him. He gets nervous when he has to talk to real adults." Everyone would laugh. I'd force a smile. And then, when we got home, she'd look at me sweetly and say, "Don't be so sensitive. I was just teasing." But it wasn't teasing. It was conditioning. She wanted to teach me that pain should be swallowed quietly, that embarrassment was just another form of obedience. Then came the night she staged her masterpiece. We were at a colleague's birthday party. Big crowd, expensive restaurant, the kind of place where everyone's pretending to enjoy themselves. I remember trying to keep things calm. I stayed close to her, smiled when she smiled, laughed when she did. But halfway through the night, she started drinking, faster than usual. And every time I tried to slow her down, she'd whisper, "Relax, stop controlling me." Around 10, she walked away from the table and disappeared. I assumed she'd gone to the bathroom. 15 minutes passed. Then 20. I texted her, no answer. I went outside to look for her and found her standing by the street, tears streaming down her face, clutching her phone. When she saw me, she screamed, "Don't touch me," loud enough for people nearby to turn their heads. I froze. "Mia, what?" "Stay away from me," she yelled, stepping back. "You're hurting me." The world went silent. I could feel every pair of eyes from the restaurant locked on us. I swear I hadn't even moved. She kept shouting, "You always do this. You always make me feel unsafe." Her voice cracked on the last word, perfectly timed, perfectly rehearsed. I looked around, and people were already whispering, pulling out their phones, recording. My heart pounded. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't shout, couldn't argue, couldn't move. Because no matter what I said, the story had already been written. Then, as quickly as it started, she broke down crying, whispering, "I'm sorry, I can't do this anymore." I stood there, frozen, watching her crumble in front of me, not out of guilt, but out of victory, because I realized in that instant that she found a final weapon. She didn't need to destroy me behind closed doors anymore. She could do it in front of everyone, and they'd help her do it. Someone, I think it was her co-worker, came up and put his arm around her, glaring at me. "You should leave," he said sharply. I wanted to explain, to beg, to show him that this wasn't real, but the look in his eyes told me it didn't matter. She'd won. I walked away, the sound of her sobbing behind me echoing like applause. The next morning, I woke up to chaos. My phone was full of messages. Co-workers, friends, even family, all asking what happened. Some were sympathetic, others angry. The video had spread. The comments were brutal. "How could he? She deserves better. This guy needs help." And Mia? She went silent. No posts, no calls, no messages. Just silence, like a phantom who'd finish her haunting. 3 days later, she texted me. Only 2 words. "We're done." It should have felt like freedom. Instead, it felt like death. Because she didn't just leave. She left a version of me behind that wasn't real. A monster that wore my face. And no matter what I did, that version was louder than the truth. I tried to reach out to friends to explain, but they'd already chosen sides. One even said, "Look, man, we saw the video. Maybe you should get help." Help. That word became a curse. Help meant believe her. Help meant admit guilt. Help meant erase yourself. I spent nights scrolling through her social media, trying to understand how she'd done it. The captions were vague but powerful, healing from what they'll never admit. Silence doesn't mean safety. Survivors don't owe you the truth. Thousands of likes, hundreds of comments, words of support. She had turned my world into her stage, and I was the villain in her standing ovation. And then, one night, she messaged again. "Do you hate me?" I stared at the screen for what felt like hours before typing. "No, I just don't understand why." Her reply came instantly. "Because you love me too much." That's when I realized she didn't just crave control. She needed to destroy what loved her most, just to prove she could. And the scariest part wasn't what she'd done to me. It was knowing she wasn't done yet. The silence after she left wasn't peace. It was the sound of my name collapsing. My phone was a crime scene. Every notification, another piece of my reputation bleeding out. Friends who once laughed with me now sent half-hearted messages like, "We just hope you're okay." Co-workers avoided eye contact. My boss called me in, asked if I needed some time away to figure things out. And all I could think was, figure what out? The truth? The lie? The version of me that Mia had built and released into the world like a ghost that refused to die? For days, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that night replaying, her tears, her voice breaking, the way everyone looked at me like I was something to be contained. I'd open my eyes to the glow of my phone and scroll through her feed, through the thousands of comments that worship her pain. She was the victim. I was the villain. And the more she said nothing, the more people filled in the silence with their own stories. All of them worse than the truth. But the thing about people like Mia is that they always overplay their hand. They can't stop performing, even when no one's watching. And it was that flaw, that endless hunger for control, that gave her away. One night, I sat in front of my laptop, staring at a post she'd made days after the incident. The caption read, "Healing from the hands that broke me." But in the photo, she wore the same outfit from that night, the same one she collapsed in, and something in the reflection of the restaurant window behind her caught my eye. Her phone, recording. My chest tightened. I zoomed in. There it was, the faint red light of her camera. She hadn't been crying in panic that night. She'd been recording, setting up the scene like a director who knew exactly where the cameras were pointed. I spent the next few nights digging. I went through old texts, voice notes, photos. The deeper I looked, the more cracks appeared. Screenshots she'd shared publicly, cropped, edited, rearranged. In one, she'd shown a message from me saying, "You make me lose control," but the original conversation was still in my phone. I'd said, "You make me lose control of my emotions. I love you too much to fight with you like this." She'd turned affection into aggression with a single swipe of her finger. Then I checked my email. Dozens of messages forwarded to herself from my account. Half-finished drafts I didn't remember writing. My hands shook as I opened one. A message supposedly written by me, apologizing for crossing lines. Except I'd never sent it. She had written it, saved it, and left it sitting there like a time bomb. Proof for a story she hadn't told yet. That's when I realized Mia hadn't lost control that night. She'd planned it. Every whisper, every accusation, every planted seed. It was all part of the narrative she'd been building for months. I was never her partner. I was her project. I called my friend Mark, one of the few who still answered. He listened quietly while I explained, voice shaking, breath ragged. When I finished, there was a long pause. Then he said, "You need to start documenting everything. Stop reacting. Start recording." And I did. I began saving everything, not just messages, but metadata, timestamps, screenshots of edits. I kept a digital log of every contact she made, every mutual friend she spoke to, every post that hinted at me. She thought I was broken. She thought I was done. But I wasn't. I was rebuilding myself in silence, one truth at a time. A week later, I noticed something strange. She'd unblocked me. I don't know why, but I didn't message her. I just watched. Her posts had shifted. No more heartbreak. No more tears. Now they were subtle. Quotes about toxic men who can't handle strong women. The comments were still sympathetic, but the engagement was lower. People were losing interest. And that's when she reached out again. At 2:14 a.m., a message appeared. "You ruined everything. I loved you." I stared at it. The words almost pathetic in their simplicity. I didn't respond. 20 minutes later, another message. "Do you ever miss me?" I still didn't reply. Then, "You don't understand what you did to me." No, I thought, "You don't understand what you did to yourself." The next morning, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answer half asleep, and her voice came through. Calm, sweet, familiar. "You think you've won," she said softly. "But people believe what I tell them. Always have, always will. Mia." I said quietly, I have proof of everything." She laughed. Not cruelly, not nervously, just softly, like I'd said something childish. "You still think the truth matters." And then she hung up. That single call told me everything. She wasn't scared. She was taunting me, the same way a cat plays with a bird before crushing it. She wanted me to fight, to panic, to post something reckless. But I didn't. I waited, because the difference between her and me was that she needed to win. I just needed to end it. A few days later, I sat across from my boss in a quiet office. I handed him a flash drive. "Before you decide anything about me," I said, "watch this." Inside were videos, voice recordings, screenshots. Not edited, not manipulated, just raw truth. It took him 2 hours. When he finally looked up, he didn't say much. He just nodded slowly and said, "We'll fix this." And we did, quietly, methodically. HR emails were traced, false reports uncovered, timestamps checked. She'd built a web, but she'd forgotten that digital lies leave digital fingerprints. The final thread snapped a month later, when one of her coworkers, the same man she'd flirted with at dinner, came forward. He'd started dating her after we split. And guess what? The same pattern had started again. Same tears, same accusations, same stories, only with a new name in the script. That's when it hit me. I was never her first story, and I wouldn't be her last. But at least this time, I was the one holding the pen. Truth doesn't explode like a bomb. It cracks quietly. It starts with whispers, small fractures in a mask that everyone used to believe was a face. That's how it began for Mia, not with dramatic reveal, but with doubt. The kind of doubt that spreads like rust, slow and unstoppable. By the time I reached the point where I was ready to expose her, I didn't even want revenge anymore. I just wanted air. I wanted space between who she said I was and who I really was. I wanted to look in the mirror and see my own reflection again instead of her version of it. It started when my boss, the same one who would believe her at first, called me into his office. "We've been reviewing everything," he said, "and there are inconsistencies." He didn't go into details, but I knew what that meant. The fake emails, the edited screenshots, the false HR complaints. They were all unraveling. Someone had finally started asking questions. Mia didn't know yet. I could see it in her posts. She was still playing the victim, still dropping carefully crafted quotes and melancholy captions like she was bleeding for an audience. Some wounds never heal. They move on while you still pick up the pieces. The comments were filled with sympathy, but there were fewer now. People were starting to sense that something didn't add up. Then one afternoon, I got an email from a journalist, someone who ran a small online column about manipulation and false allegations. She said she received a tip about my situation, that she'd seen the videos I provided to my company, and she wanted to talk. At first, I said no. I didn't want to drag it out anymore. But then I thought about all the people who believe her lies, the ones she convinced, the ones she'd isolate next. So I said yes. We met in a small cafe on the quiet side of the city. I brought my laptop, my notes, my folder, everything I'd gathered over months of living under her shadow. The journalist listened without interrupting. When I was done, she sat back and said, "You realize she's done this before, right?" The air left my lungs. "What?" She nodded. Different city, different guy, same pattern. We've been tracking similar cases for a while, all with the same behavioral markers. Same kind of posts, same timeline, same emotional language. It wasn't just me. I was just the latest chapter in a book she'd been writing her whole life. A few weeks later, the article came out. It wasn't sensationalized. It wasn't some gotcha piece. It was careful, deliberate, factual. It didn't even name her. It didn't have to. It described a case of digital manipulation and narrative abuse, complete with timestamps, evidence, and anonymized messages that anyone close to her could recognize. The story spread quietly but powerfully. I didn't check the comments at first. I didn't want to see the chaos. But eventually, curiosity won. And there it was, the shift. People who'd once defended her now hesitated. The same friends who'd reposted her healing quotes were suddenly silent. Her co-workers stopped liking her posts. The sympathy turned into confusion. then into disbelief, and then into distance. Her next post came 2 days later. Just one line. When they can't control the story, they rewrite it. But no one liked it. Not a single comment. The echo chamber she built had collapsed in on itself. I didn't celebrate. I didn't post. I didn't say, see? I told you. Because I'd learned something about the truth. It doesn't need applause. It just needs to exist. A few weeks later, she called me. Her name flashed on my screen for the first time in months. My chest tightened, but I answered. I don't even know why. Mia, I said quietly. For a moment, there was only silence. Then her voice, small, unsteady. You think you won. I closed my eyes. No, I said, there's no winning in something like this. She laughed weakly, the sound frayed around the edges. You think they'll believe you forever? People forget. They move on, but I'll still be here. I always survive. You don't survive, I said softly. You just start over. There was another pause, then a faint whisper. You really think you're better than me? No, I said, just free. The line went dead, and in that moment, I didn't feel victory. I felt release, like the sound of a storm fading after years of thunder. I went outside that night and walked for hours. The city lights blurred like distant stars. I passed the cafe where we first met, the restaurant where she'd staged her breakdown, the office building where she destroyed my name. They were all still there, physical places that held pieces of my past, but they no longer felt heavy, because I'd finally understood something. Mia had never really controlled me. She'd only convinced me that I needed her permission to be myself. And now I didn't. It's strange how quiet life feels when the chaos leaves. You think peace will sound like music, like laughter, like some grand cinematic resolution. But it doesn't. It's just still. The absence of noise, the silence where her voice used to live. For a while, that silence scared me. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. expecting the vibration of my phone, expecting to see her name lighting up the screen, expecting the accusations, the crying, the endless pull back into the storm. But the calls never came again. And the longer the quiet stretched, the more I began to realize that what I'd mistaken for love had only ever been addiction. Her chaos was my drug, and detoxing from her was the hardest thing I'd ever done. The article had done its work. People started seeing her for who she really was, or at least for who she'd allowed herself to become. She didn't vanish right away. People like Mia never disappear suddenly. They dissolve. Bit by bit, she lost her audience. The sympathy faded, the pity turned cold, and the friends who once protected her stopped answering her messages. I heard from someone that she'd moved cities again. Started over. New name, new job, new story. That's what she did best. She never healed. She just rebooted. And somewhere out there, someone new was probably falling in love with a version of her I once met. Soft, wounded, mysterious. The version that looks like a fairy tale until you realize you're the monster in it. For a long time, I hated her. I wanted her to suffer, to wake up every morning and feel the same shame she made me feel. I imagined her scrolling through my photos, seeing the calm on my face, realizing that she didn't destroy me after all. But hate is just another kind of tether. It keeps you tied to the thing you're trying to escape. So one night, I wrote her name on a piece of paper, folded it twice, and burned in a glass bowl on my kitchen counter. I watched the smoke rise and disappear, and for the first time, I didn't feel anything. No anger, no sadness, just release. It took me months to trust people again, to trust myself. Mia had rewritten the way I saw the world. For so long, I'd measured my worth through her eyes. What I said, what I did, what I didn't do. She trained me to second-guess every emotion, every instinct, until I couldn't tell the difference between guilt and love. And even after she was gone, that wiring stayed. I'd meet new people and wait for the manipulation, for the twist, for the knife behind the smile. But not everyone is her. That's something you have to learn slowly, that there are people who don't want to own you, only know you. It wasn't easy. I had nights when I almost texted her, not because I wanted her back, but because I missed the noise. I missed having something to react to, someone to defend myself against. Silence can be unnerving when you've lived inside someone else's storm for so long. You start to crave the lightning, even when you know it'll burn you. But I held on. I told myself, you don't need her chaos to feel alive. You just need time to remember what peace sounds like. Eventually, I started writing again. At first, it was just notes, fragments of thoughts, half memories, questions I didn't know how to answer. Then it became essays, then stories. I didn't write about her directly, not at first. But she was in everything. In the spaces between sentences, in the pauses where my mind hesitated before trusting itself again. Writing became the therapy she'd always pretended to be for me. It wasn't about revenge or proving anything. It was about reclaiming my voice, one word at a time. And through that process, I realized something else. I wasn't her first victim, but I might have been her last. Because when truth survives, even quietly, it echoes. It finds its way to the next person who needs to hear it. And maybe, somewhere, the next version of me will read my story and see the red flag sooner. Maybe he'll recognize that charm can be a mask, and broken can sometimes mean dangerous. Maybe he'll walk away before he ever gets caught in her orbit. People still ask me sometimes, "Do you think she loved you?" I used to say no, but now I'm not so sure. I think, in her own way, she did, just not the way most people understand love. To Mia, love wasn't connection. It was control. It was the mirror she held up to see herself reflected in someone else's devotion. And when the reflection faded, she shattered the glass and blamed the cracks on me. Maybe that's all she ever knew how to do. Now, when I look back, I don't see her as a monster anymore. I see a warning, a lesson written in scars and screenshots. And I've learned that healing doesn't come when people believe your side. It comes when you stop needing them to. Sometimes, late at night, I still get phantom memories. The way she'd smile after an argument. The way she'd whisper my name like a secret. They feel like echoes from another life. But I don't chase them anymore. Because ghosts only stay if you keep inviting them in. I guess this is my last message. Not to her, but to anyone who's still where I was. If you're living with someone who twists every truth, who makes love feel like walking on glass, who turns every "I'm sorry" into a weapon, leave. Don't wait for them to break you into proof. Don't wait for the world to see what they are. The world doesn't need to understand. You just need to survive. They'll call you cold. They'll say you gave up. But trust me, leaving isn't cold. It's courage. And one day, you'll wake up and the silence will no longer sound empty. It'll sound like freedom. I used to think she destroyed me. But all she really did was strip away the version of me that believed love had to hurt to be real. Now I know better. And if she ever hears my name again, I hope she remembers she didn't create me. She just taught me what I'll never become.